Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. How is everyone doing this evening? Happy and blessed Monday, and welcome to episode 588, I believe, of the Welcome to Asgard podcast, where tonight we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. I didn't want to put it in the title of the video, as I don't want to be trying to get more views, more clicks, more eyes because of his death. But obviously, we are going to talk about the death of Rob Reiner. We're going to talk about some of the best movies that he ever made, because despite the fact that there were a lot of things that he said, a lot of things that he believed that very much go against the very principles that I stand for as a traditional Catholic, I still at the same time can't ignore the fact that he was a very talented director and that he has made arguably some of the best American films ever made. Princess Bride, of course, being at the top of that list amongst so many others. And it's really, really sad and really, really disturbing to see the amount of people, including our president, who are being very callous about this whole situation. At the end of the day, this guy, this man, this human being was murdered. And that's not okay. And we should not have any celebration or any lack of empathy for the fact that this is a man who has lost his life. His wife as well has lost her life. And that there are people being left behind who are human beings who are going to be going through a lot of difficult times ahead. So I just wanted to, get that out there at the start. Again, didn't want to put it in the title of the video, but obviously it was going to come up, and so I figured I would just talk about it right away. I think the entire situation's awful. It's just kind of heartbreaking to think about because, again, you don't have to like somebody to still feel empathy towards them. And one of the things that I think makes especially people with, a Christian Catholic background different than kind of the modern culture of today is that we don't take joy in the death of others. We don't celebrate the death of others, and we don't lack empathy towards them. So, rest in peace to Rob Reiner, to his wife, and praying for his family as well as they go through what can only be a very difficult time, especially with early indications being that it might have actually been his son who has been struggling with drug addiction for much of his life. It's very tragic, terrible situation. No matter who it happens to, you don't want to see this kind of thing happen to anybody. And so anyway, just wanted to kind of get that out there. But we are going to be talking about that. We'll talk a little bit about what we maybe think in the chat are some of the best films that Rob Reiner has ever made and been a part of. We'll also talk about the upcoming apocalypse, at least for me, which is, of course, the release of Avatar 3, Avatar Fire and Ash. As you all know, I'm a big Avatar fan, he said sarcastically. And man, oh man, I kind of just wanted to get released so that way we can just start the countdown of how much more we actually have to talk about it because it bothers me so much of how much money those movies make. It really does, because the films just aren't good. Like, they're just, in comparison especially, they're just not they're not at the level of what they are getting. So we'll talk about that and a plethora of other things, including the things that y'all bring up in the chat. So please make sure you smash that like button. Watching over on the Green Machine, make sure you smash the rumble button as well. Let's go ahead and say hello to our people who are hanging out in the chat tonight. By the way, my voice is obviously not up to 100%. Post-nasal drip leads to loss of voice. As a teacher especially, it just goes hand in hand with each other. So might not be able to go full show tonight. We'll see how it goes. But thank y'all for hanging out here nonetheless. So at 4:35, we had Kimberly G, Killian Shadowcat. What's going on, Kimberly G? Gandalf 1477 saying, hi, what's going on? Member here on the channel. Kimberly G, thanks for being here. Speaking of under the weather, we got King Kane Rumsky, the king of the Kane Rumsky himself, over on Green Machine, saying under the weather, so I might miss tonight. Be strong. Also, I'm on the road next week for Christmas. Hopefully this doesn't cause you devastating mental damage. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. I can't even do my Jimmy Stewart. Merry Christmas early to you. Blessed rest of your Advent, KK and Rumsky. And yeah, we'll still be live next Monday. We'll still be live next Monday. And it'll be interesting. Yeah, luckily for us, we've always made it a point to try to stay here at our house, especially once we start having kids, because there's something very special about being at your own home on Christmas morning, and all the routines and all of the traditions that you develop along the way. So luckily we'll be here for Christmas, and then we'll have her family coming, my wife's family coming this year. So should be a good time. Thanatos Felicitas at 634 saying, hello, Odin, hello to you. Thanatos, welcome back. Xvoot coming in with a $2 super chat. Can barely do that. Saying, good evening, all. RIP to Rob. No one deserves that. Amen, brother. Yeah, no one deserves it. Again, we can dislike somebody. We can disagree with somebody completely. But at the end of the day, no one deserves that. And we should not be taking happiness in that. We should not be making light of it either. And that's why there's a lot of comments being made on social media by some very prominent personalities, including leaders of the free world. And honestly, it's like, I think Jeremy said it best in his response saying, dude, read the room. It's like, this is a bad take. Read the room, man. It was not a good take at all. And he's not the kind of person that takes his words back. But if there's ever a time to do that, it would be now, because all that it ever does when you make comments like that is make people who already hate you that much more entrenched in their hatred of you, and then those on the fence about you push over the edge to hate you or to dislike you or to dislike you even more. So it does not benefit anybody. It benefits nobody at all, except maybe his ego, and that just bothers me. It's one of the many things of as far as like the personality that just drive me nuts when it comes to the president. Again, it's common decency. So absolutely, we pray for the repose of his soul. Excuse me. We pray for the repose of his soul, and we pray for his family, especially. Snorpupus Cuber, hello, humans and other quitters. What's going on, Snorpupus? Welcome back. Thing, hello to you. We got Gary Banjo Sandwich Worthington of the Banjo Sandwich himself. Well, this is a week for sadness with idiots killing people in Australia. Yeah, that whole thing too. The United States, Rob and his wife murdered. The world needs prayers more than ever. Absolutely. Absolutely. If there's ever more evidence that we need God more than ever in our lives, it is exactly what we're seeing right now. The evidence is absolutely all around us. Jeremy Sikowski, what's going on, good sir? Saying, evening, Odin. And everyone on here, good evening to you. Avatar is not going to help heal the world. No, it is not. No, it is not. Forever Sci-Fi, who is a member, hail to you, Forever Sci-Fi. Thank you very much for being here. We got Lance Mala, who is a member here on the channel. What's going on, Lance? Saying, Wrestling Running, did you happen to catch your favorite wrestler, John Cena, in his alleged last match this past weekend? I have a feeling you would love the finish. Yeah, I didn't get to watch the entire match. I watched some of it. I was able to watch a little bit of the Geeks and Gamers coverage over on Locals. And at the end of the day, I thought about staying on to watch the rest of it, but then I just realized how little I care and how happy I am that the John Cena era is over officially. I'm one where from the very beginning, I've been watching wrestling for a long time. I started back when I was maybe 10 years old. Some of my first wrestling shows where I was like between 10 and 13, going with my grandfather, my papa, going with my uncle. My brothers were into it, especially me and my older brother. We grew up with the Attitude Era. That was the era that we grew up watching. The Monday Night Wars were a big part of the wrestling growing up. We grew up watching WCW, actually. And it was in the course of the Monday Night Wars that we eventually switched over to, at the time, WWF, eventually WWE. And it was, it's kind of, amazing to see how things have gone since then. But the product has been terrible for a long time. And I still go back to the whole Ruthless Aggression era. The start of John Cena's career was, in my opinion, the beginning of the end of my love of professional wrestling, at least from like the WWE's perspective. Because as soon as they went PG, a big part of that was John Cena. And John Cena was like, he's the face of the PG era. And he was never good in the ring. Despite what anyone tries to argue, he's never been good in the ring. He always looks so stiff. He, again, when wrestling looks fake, you're doing it wrong. And every time he was in the ring, it always just looked weird. Like, it just never looked right. And because he just was not a very good performer in the ring. Mic skills, I would at the very least say on the mic, he was pretty good. On the mic, he was pretty good. Terrible actor, but at least for mic work, he was good as far as being able to stay on his toes, saying his lines, but also being able to improv. He was good at that. The emotion part of it felt fake. Always felt fake. But at the very least, he could say the words. And again, make up words on the spot pretty effectively too. But yeah, glad that whole thing is over, to be honest. Because it was something where it was a reminder of all the things that kind of destroyed wrestling, at least for me. I've been booing him from the beginning, and so when they decided to bring him back, and then the whole heel, it's like the heel turn. I was so happy that they finally did it, but also at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but even this, it's like way too late. And then they botched it completely too. It went nowhere. It was a complete waste of time. Anyway. Lance, thank you for coming in. I know that you're more of a wrestling guy, so I appreciate your support. Luke Zilla, tied to say, hello. I hope you and the family are doing well. Big week for the box office. Yes, indeed. I mean, obviously, we've got Zootopia 2 just running away with it. Crazy that film is pacing. It's already past 1.1 billion after just 3 weekends. I mean, it's well on its way to making up to like 1.5 billion or more. And the big question is going to be, what makes more? Is it going to be Zootopia 2 or is it going to be Avatar? We don't really know exactly what Avatar is going to make in China. If the last movie is any indication, though, it did well in China, but it did not do Zootopia levels. So because of that, it's going to already have a major disadvantage, because there's the potential for this Avatar film to make half in China what Zootopia 2 was able to make. And that's going to mean like 250 million or more less than Zootopia. So that already puts it at a disadvantage, because then it means to perform better than Zootopia 2 in both the domestic and international market. Zootopia 2 is performing very well domestically. I could definitely see a world where, even though the starting point a lot higher for the start of Zootopia 2, because it had the Thanksgiving holiday frame, so kind of that running opening weekend. But the early indications, the early tracking for Avatar 3 is not fantastic, at least for the opening weekend domestically. And that's just really, you're taking the opening weekend projections, comparing them to other films from this past year, comparing them even to the first film. Avatar is always an entity and always been a property that makes money as it goes along, that keeps making money down the line, right? That has very good legs in the long run. But at the same time, we can't deny the fact that between the first and second film, there was a massive loss of audience. Remember, when the first film came out in 2009, it made around, $2.9 billion? That's not adjusting for inflation. So that in 2009 in today's dollars is equivalent to, I think, $3.5 to $4 billion. So you compare that to Avatar Way of Water, and you're talking about almost like $1 billion plus of lost audience, value-wise of audience, and at the very least, $1 billion more of lost revenue, for in between those two. So the audience didn't build, the audience decreased. I would not be surprised if the audience decreases once again for this movie, because these movies really just don't have a cultural impact. I know that Critical Drinker has done a video on this. I know a lot of people have often talked about this as an issue. It's going to make a lot of money. No denying here. As much as I hate the film, I hate the franchise, I won't deny that those films make a bunch of money, a boatload of money. And this film is not going to be any different. It's going to make a ton of money. But just because it's making money, just because that's what's going on, does not mean that, 1, it's good, 2, that it's going to have any cultural impact, and 3, that it's going to really matter in any way. All right, JS Penny at 7:30 saying, ahoy, ahoy to you. Thank you very much for hanging out tonight. Got about 23 people watching. A little light, light, but I'm sure there's also a lot of other streams happening, especially with all the news going on right now. JS Pena saying Rob Reiner was a nut, but he didn't deserve what happened to him. Yeah, I mean, we can agree, we can disagree with all the various things that he, and just like anyone else, right? Just because I don't agree with somebody does not. I think, and I take what happened to, for instance, in the wake of the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that was a case where she just died of old age, essentially, right? She died at an age that is very common, commonplace. This is a very different situation, right? Because this is a man who was older, but he was murdered, right? And so I think the aspect of him being murdered makes a vast difference. Because even in the case of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I still don't think the appropriate response would be to praise her death. Even though I think that some of the decisions she was a part of were some of the most damaging decisions, right? And we can talk about those things, right? There's a difference between talking about someone's ideas, picking them apart, criticizing them, and then going after the person themselves. And part of the Christian ethic is trying to find that balance, right? Of, you often hear that old expression of like, hate the sin, not the sinner. Obviously, those two things are tied together because the sinner is the one who commits the sins, but we also can't forget the fact that there's a human being, right? There's a human being with a soul, with, the image of God within them. And we need to never forget that. And it can be, especially in the political realm, it can be very difficult to see that. It can be very difficult to be able to separate those two things out and remind ourselves that it's the same person at the end of the day, right? Yeah, it's awful. Ninja Mix 80, RIP to Rob and his wife. Absolutely. All right, we got Shorty Short, Laura, the Mother Major General story. What is going on? Thank you very much for hanging out, for waving. Shark Boy was just putting W in the chat. Okay. Mikey Dreamer tried to say, hey, Odin, have you been working on your top 10 list of films for this year? I mean, slowly. There's a lot of films I haven't watched. I'm always delayed in my list. I never put out top 10 list in December. I know a lot of people try to do that, and they try to do it as an end-of-year thing. Personally, if you're a person that has been able to watch like a lot of the films or most of the films in a year, I say you go right ahead. If you're not able to, though, it's like, I'm sorry, it's like it wouldn't be an authentic list. It would be an incomplete list. It would be a list subject to change, and so it's like I don't want to put that out there. More so, I'm probably going to this week start to work on biggest box office bombs, biggest box office hits, biggest studio losers, things like that. Might try to, get those out this year. Sometimes that's also a bit of a struggle. But yeah, top 10 list probably won't come until like sometime in January, February, to be honest, because sometimes it takes me a while to catch up with everything. Forever Sci-Fi, who's a member saying, I'll always treasure The Princess Bride. So thank you and RIP to Rob Reiner and his wife. Prayers for his family as well. I can't imagine something like this. Absolutely. I mean, it's insane. It's so crazy. XBoot85, thank you for another $5. That's a super chat. Appreciate it, man. Are you looking forward to The Odyssey? He asks. What is your favorite Nolan film? Inception is mine, but Memento is a close number 2. Batman's were great too. Well, thank you for the question. Honestly, I'm not all that excited. I think Nolan is a very talented director. I think Nolan, over the last couple of films, has just really gotten full of himself. And I think he has now become way too much of the guy that is making decisions because he's the auteur and not because he's necessarily fully passionate. I'm not saying that he's lost his passion. I can't judge him on that. I can't read into his psyche, okay? But that's just the perception for me. Because even though I did actually like Tenet, unlike most people, I only was able to enjoy it because I went in knowing the sound design was terrible. Objectively speaking, the sound design was terrible. And because I went in and I have the ability to hyper-focus from time to time, I was able to understand the majority of the film and actually enjoyed it. But I'm also of the mind where it's like, I understand why anyone would hate it, and I think you're completely legitimate to hate it because of how terrible the sound design was, and the story was confusing. If you can't understand what's being said, it's not going to be possible to actually understand the story. Even if you can read the subtitles and read this, it's already a complex story. add on top of that bad sound design, and it is that much worse. So that's why any criticisms people have of the film, I'm like, yep, you won't hear an argument from me. I enjoyed it still, but you won't hear me try to argue against those very legitimate criticisms that many people have towards it. So, I looked at that, and then Oppenheimer I thought was vastly overrated. There's some really cool sequences. There's some really cool things in there, but overall, it really honestly is destroyed by, and I know people say, like, why do you care so much about it? Because this is how unnecessary it was. The unnecessary nudity. I mean, again, you just think back to those scenes and you think, why? Why would you taint any of this with that type of nonsense? And it's also something that's just very unlike him. It's not something that he really has in any of his movies. And again, maybe there's films from his past where he has nudity, but it's not many. And it's a story. It's a historical film, and so you really don't need it. The other thing too, this is again more of a principled argument than anything else. But the very fact that he went out of his way to make this movie, he had to have known that because of the name, because of the historical relevancy, that this would be a film watched by younger audiences, dads bringing their sons to like learn something, for instance, or it was more of a guy's movie, at least in its marketing. And it's like, that's something that some parents, obviously, I think any parent should always look into a film before bringing their kids to it. So it would have been easy to see the warnings and to see the rated R rating and why it earned the rated R rating and everything like that. But it's also like, I can see why someone would have their guard down too, because like, oh, it's a Nolan film. It's a Nolan film and it's rated R. So they would just immediately think, oh, it must be because of maybe language or because of some serious subject matter. So it bothered me more of the principle there because of the impact that would have had, right? And then when the fact that he has the film distributed and it's being shown in the Middle East, and the Middle East has their own cut of the film where they basically like put black bars or something like that over it, and it's like, why can't we get that? Why can't we have access to that? Obviously, I have other issues with it other than that, but that to me is a pretty big issue because it's more than just the fact that it's there. It's what would motivate someone to think, oh, I have to put this in my movie. Again, it served no purpose whatsoever. So it definitely brings me to really question the mindset of someone who would come to that decision. Let's see. Very 754. Thank you for the $5 SSS super chat saying, thank God that Five Nights at Freddy 2 was a cheap movie. I've seen it twice now and loved it. Happy to see happy to see it make some money. Yeah, I will say, thank you for the super chat. It is definitely not as cheap though as the first film. The first film I think cost about $20 million to make. There's estimates that this film cost like $50 million to make. So that's quite a bit more. And that's why the break even for the film is, a little bit obscured, but based off of what we're seeing, if you take the average of that amount, it's made money. And even if you take the high end of that, it's also already broken even too. So yeah, I mean, fans of the franchise, I think, are going to be very happy with the fact that it has made money and will continue to add on to its profits. But yeah, Short saying it was a tragic weekend. Yes, seriously. I mean, then there was also the whole thing with Brown University, which kind of, the whole Brown University thing almost felt like an afterthought in many ways. And it's so disheartening and so sad that we live in a world where a shooting at a university gets overshadowed because there's graver tragedies in our world. It's very bad. All right. So thank you for that. We got Brady 6687. Brady, thank you for the $10. That's a super chat. Appreciate the $10 super chat. Saying, people make fun of me for liking Avatar, but those films bring me joy, especially after my mom passed away. I enjoy the films for their sincerity and empathy. Hey, look, I'm never going to attack you because you enjoy a movie. And if it ever comes across that way, I apologize. I don't understand what is to enjoy of the films unless, understanding it from that lens, Brady, right? Where you're talking about a clear family connection, right? So you have a clear family connection. And I think that is, to me, whenever there are connections to be made with family, that's a perfect reason to enjoy something. So that's why I would never, to me, I have an issue with people who try to make an objective argument, right? Because that's your subjective experience. That is clearly a subjective connection, right? That none of us can really have a similar connection to. So I look to that, and I think how, many of the people that are arguing in support of the film are not coming at it from that lens. And they somehow try to make the argument that the films are somehow objectively good. And it's like, just because it's got pretty visual effects does not make the story good, does not make the complete end product good, or really worth seeing, or worth supporting. So I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you find some enjoyment from it. And I never try to take away anyone's subjective experience for something. But again, I won't make fun of you for liking it, other than just the fun that people poke at others about almost any opinion on any film. People can make fun of me for liking a various number of films. But thank you for sharing that, though. I appreciate it. All right, back into the chat. Thanatos saying, I have no schadenfreude for what happened. No one should. I mean, if you are happy or finding joy in this situation, then you need help. Spiritually, especially. Forever Sci-Fi, I leave the judgment to someone far more qualified. Agreed. Frank G. Hello, Odin. Hello to you, Frank. Welcome back. Gandalf. Kimberly G. saying, howdy, Odin and all in the chat. R.I.P. to Rob Reiner. Princess Bride is one of my favorite movies. I can practically quote the whole thing. Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way as well. Magnus Magnuson, welcome back. Mary, if you have a comment or question you want read aloud, put at Odin at the very beginning of your comment, at Odin. Let me know you're trying to get my attention. And of course, I do try to prioritize super chats as they come in, unless I get distracted by stories or other things. But thank you to those who have already super chatted. Appreciate it. Speaking of which, let me now jump ahead to XVoot. So XVoot, thank you for a $2 SSS super chat saying here, do you think Mario 2 will repeat the success of number 1? Yeah, definitely. Now that we have some historical precedent for it, then I would say yes. People go back in time and they're like, oh yeah, remember when you were wrong about that film? And remember, I never said the film wasn't going to do well. I just didn't think it was going to hit $1 billion. And it was because based off of the historical data we had about the kind of film that it was and the properties and the IPs, there was no real historical reason to think that it was going to. Unless you had the gut feeling, unless you were looking at the fandom, whatever it might have been, right, that would have made you think that it would have done as well as it did. It wouldn't have been based on historical data. So now that we have it, it's obviously set its own precedent. Then, yeah, at this point, it would be very easy for me to say, yeah, don't be surprised if that film is yet another $1 billion film, and if it continues to grow. Now, whether it's going to be good or not, remember, I was also really not a big fan of the first film either. I don't think it was a very good film. I had a lot of issues, especially with some of the voice acting choices. I didn't like that Bowser wasn't Bowser, but was just Jack Black. Donkey Kong was just Seth Rogen. Kind of had an issue with that. I wish the story had been a little bit better. Obviously, it wasn't, really made for the adults as much as it was for the kids and family audience. And I said, if you are a fan of this or a child, I totally understand why you would enjoy it. If you're not one of those two things, I think there's a lot of reasons to criticize it. All right, let's see. Luke Zilla, 746, did I say, some folks online are currently predicting 63 to 100 million opening for Avatar 3 in China based on its pre-ticket sales there. Could go higher or lower depending on walk-up business as well. And if that happens, again, that sounds good, but that's nothing compared to what Zootopia 2 was able to do. It honestly boggles the mind how well that movie's doing. I knew it'd do well. Remember, I was saying for a long time now, hey, Zootopia 2 for $1 billion, don't sleep on it. At one point, I think he even said, this has a much higher chance of hitting $1 billion than a lot of the other films that are coming out in this year. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. But no one, I think, could have predicted, right? It was a, $196, $200+ million opening weekend in China for that film. It's made over $500 million, I think it was the last report. And the numbers.com doesn't have it at that yet, but it obviously will be getting there at some point. It's crazy. Crazy. But yeah, $6,300 million is nothing in comparison to the numbers that came from that. So if that trend continues, though, again, if it makes half of what Zootopia 2 makes, that could actually end up being the big difference between which one makes more money, between it and Avatar. At this point, I would say, and again, very, very early, because with Avatar, China's not going to be what gives it the most money. It's the question mark is really more so on how strong are those other international markets going to be, and long term, what's Avatar's domestic going to be. I could see domestic being competitive between Avatar and Zootopia, especially since Avatar is going to have a much weaker projected opening. International outside of China, that's going to be, I think, where Avatar might be able to make some inroads and maybe outperform in some ways. It's not looking like China's going to be that factor, though. So if you're already 200 million plus by the end of your run behind where Zootopia is in China, you're making about half, if not more, or less, rather. Maybe only a third or a half at best compared. And again, we don't have any data yet. This is just pure speculation. But if you're now $200 to $250 million behind your competitor, at least in, who's going to be the biggest film of 2025, then you need to make that up elsewhere. Domestically, I don't think that's going to be where it is. Internationally, outside of China, that could be. But $250 million worth of difference, I'm not sure. But also, that would mean we're looking at $1.5+ billion for Zootopia 2, and then potentially 1.5 or less for Avatar. So, still too early to tell. Still way too early to tell. But it will be interesting. It will be very interesting to see those things. All right, we're talking about some number. We've been talking about some numbers already, but I do think that we should formally move into talking about some numbers, and you know what that means. We're talking about some numbers and a certain number of equations.
Time to see a real mathematician at work.
That's right, everybody. It's time to do some math and to see a real mathematician at work. So obviously, this past weekend saw a couple of pretty big things happening at the box office. We had Zootopia 2 reaching $1.137 billion at the global box office, crushing everything in its wake. That also brought its total projected profit based off of what the studio typically gets back, return on investment, at roughly $176.6 million in net profits. Still a far cry from the $1 billion of losses that Disney has had this year, not being helped either by the new flop from Disney, this time through Searchlight Productions, right? Searchlight Studios, with Ella McKay, which made single digits and cost enough to where this is a $51 million film in the red, in the hole. Not expected to make much of a difference back there. Tron Ares, of course, is still sucking a lot of the air out of the room with over $200 million worth of losses as well. So this is definitely a good sign, a good direction for Disney with Zootopia 2, but they also have a very long way to go before they're actually, one, making up even just for the losses of Tron Ares, Ella McKay, but also the other losses from all the various films that they have had released, all the various flops that they have released this past year. Early indications, though, switching now over to Avatar Fire and Ash. Some of the early tracking, and obviously these are all subject to change, so do take these with a grain of salt. We won't have the official projections for the weekend until sometime tomorrow or Wednesday, as this film is expected to open. Opening Thursday with the early showings, and then, of course, full opening on Friday. But as you can see, for the 3-day opening weekend, Right now, Box Office Theory, at least as of their last 6-week update, this was then on the 11th, so only about 3 or 4 days old information at this point, so probably not too far off what the final prediction is going to be. They're projecting the film will make $100.1 million in its domestic opening. What's most interesting, though, is that whereas the domestic is only at $100 million, low end of 90, high end of 105, very far cry from the opening of Zootopia 2, amongst others, which, Wicked for Good, for instance, opened much higher than that, however, also has dropped off quite a bit. The overall projection is very impressive because they are projecting, Sean Robbins over on Box Office Theory is projecting that the total domestic for Avatar 3 for Fire and Ash is going to be $500+ million. Now, just that alone, all right, points us to something that I've been saying for a long time, which is that, hey, Avatar is going to make $1 billion. Minimum will make $1 billion. When you're making $500 million domestically in a film that is in a franchise that is known for its international strengths, you're making at least $500 million internationally, and probably closer to $1 billion internationally. But that would then mean the film would make only about 1.6 billion, which again on paper is good compared to the budget. A little hard to say. The early numbers are that the amount for this specific film may have been close to $400 million. And if that's the case, that would make the film barely profitable. At $400 million, you need to make about 1.2 billion just to break even. That's not even accounting for, how much extra marketing might have been a part of it. Now, I do go back a little bit because remember when Disney made their initial agreement and deal with James Cameron, Disney basically gave him $1 billion to make 5 movies. So you have to then divvy up that total amount into those movies. But it is still interesting nonetheless that we are now, again, getting these various reports that the film might have actually individually have cost upwards of $400 million. And that would be production budget, not with marketing. Now let's see if there's been any updates on this. But as you can see, this is coming out of Variety. All right. It says that the film's reported $400+ million budget and franchise obligations. So that is quite staggering. If we go back a little bit here, let's see if we can get some perspective. The last film's budget actually came in at between $350 and $460 million. So that's actually quite higher than I remember reporting at the time. It's amazing how these budgets can ebb and flow and change over time. And obviously this would have been in the aftermath of being picked up by Disney for the remaining movies, right, that were going on there. So that film went on to make $2.3 billion. But again, the first film made $2.9 billion unadjusted, which again, realistically, as I mentioned earlier, is about $3.5 to $4 billion in today's standards. So that was already about a $600 million plus, maybe even over $1 billion difference between those two movies. We're not going to see that kind of difference, but I would not be surprised if this film makes less than $2 billion. And you might think, well, if it's making less than $2 billion, that's still like, what, north of 1.5? Yeah. Again, I think 1.5 at this point is a very likely bottom note. I think the film right now is set to be $1.5 to $1.9 billion. Now, again, this is just pure speculation on my part. We have no actual data yet. That's going to make, obviously, all of the difference in the world. But with that being said, we do have some historical things to look at. We do have the trends to look at as well. And from all indications, this seems to be a better film than The Way of Water was, at least according to some. There's others who say this is worse, that this is not as good as the last film. Now, again, I don't think any of the films have been good. But anyway, Avatar Fire and Ash started shooting simultaneously with The Way of Water in New Zealand on September 25th. Filming completed in late December 2020 after over 3 years of shooting. With an estimated budget of $400 million, it is one of the most expensive films ever made. Now, because it was shot at the same time, because it was shot simultaneously with the second film, this is where the question of the budgets come in, right? Now, if they are reporting budgets for an individual film, this would mean that they spent roughly $1 billion production budget between these two movies. That doesn't seem like it matches what the initial agreement was between James Cameron and 20th Century Studios. Now, one could argue, well, the billion was for James Cameron, and production budgets are a whole other separate thing. That obviously could be a part of it. You then look to the fact that Lightstorm Entertainment, which is a production company founded by James Cameron, so Cameron is also funding this film in addition to 20th Century Studios. And so there's questions of how much of this is from James Cameron, how much of this is from Disney, how much of this is from Disney by way of James Cameron, as far as like payments are concerned. Whenever it comes to Disney and financials, I think there's always a lot of funny math going on there. But obviously, as one that's not able to look into their books or anything like that, I have to kind of leave it there. But at the end of the day, we're looking at a film that, again, is going to be successful. It's going to make over $1 billion. But is it actually going to be profitable or not? That, I think, is going to be the most interesting dynamic. Because, as I said, it needs to make roughly $1.2 billion to break even on paper. And if we're looking at this film making around $1.5 billion plus as kind of like a baseline, so it could obviously make a lot more if the box office comes in a lot higher than that. We're looking at a film then that might barely break even, depending on where it makes a lot of this money. Might not be. I don't think this film, though it might be one of the biggest total box offices of 2025, I think there's no doubt about that. Everyone's been saying this for a long time. I do also think that this will not be the most profitable film of 2025. Because, again, those budgets for Disney, for James Cameron, are just insane, out of control. But early indications are opening weekend's not going to be all that impressive, at least domestically. Worldwide, I think we'll see a lot. I could see 300 million or more in global totals your opening weekend. Total domestic 505 is what's being projected. That sounds realistic to me. Also would indicate that we would be seeing a lot less total box office for this compared to some of the other films. So if we are to pull up for a second, again, I don't like using Box Office Mojo, but it's a heck of a lot faster than the numbers.com, unfortunately. If it only makes $500 million, that would still be almost $200 million less than what Avatar Way of Water made, as far as perspective, okay? Made well over $1 billion internationally, right? And if we go to the original release of the film, let's see, for that film, of the of that billion plus made, it made only 245 million of that in China. Now, again, that's still a large amount of money, but remember where Zootopia 2 is right now with roughly $500 million, okay? Now, its opening weekend in China was 56.7. Now, there do seem to be indications, someone mentioned in the chat earlier, that it might actually be heading towards a higher opening, and if that happens, could that be a sign that China is ready to play again for some of these bigger tentpole films? It could be. Definitely could be the case. But $2.3 billion globally. I do think this could be the first time that Avatar makes less than $2 billion. And as it makes less than $2 billion potentially, and the budget being as high as it is, and now the net returns becoming much, much less, what could this be? What sign could be indicated as far as what the future of this franchise holds? Still a little too early to tell, but we, of course, will continue to follow it. Let's head back into the chat. Let's see, Jay Nash saying, thank you, Odin. This channel will be appreciated because it is of the best quality. I appreciate it, Jay Nash. Thank you. Let's see. Banjo Sandwich tag to say, more flop 10 than top 10. Definitely. A lot more flops this year and a lot more competition for flops. Thanatos saying, I think Nolan is stuck on smelling his own fart. At this point, yes, I would definitely agree. Forever Sci-Fi, I was surprised that Shad didn't throw a fit on FNT over the armor and weapons in the Odyssey trailer. Yeah, I mean, there are certain things that will set him off, others that won't. I'm sure as we get closer to it, we could see a change. Let's see. Luke Zilla had to say the first teaser for Avengers Doomsday got leaked. Kind of crazy. They're doing 4 teasers per week in front of Avatar 3. Guess the MCU is pretty desperate to get general audiences back. Yeah. And because that's not just for the MCU, right? That's also because they're doing that because on the one hand, Disney owns Avatar, right? The distribution rights and everything. So it's getting eyeballs on Avatar, which is something they want because they're going to get money from that. They also want eyes on the trailers for the MCU film as well. So they know, hey, a lot of people are going to see Avatar. Let's get the MCU hype going again. Not necessarily the same audience. I'm sure there's a lot of crossover, but not always. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out for them. I don't think, keep in mind, I think Avengers Doomsday, not everyone thinks this, but I do think that film likely has $1 billion in it as far as potential, but it's going to be because of the casting. It's going to be the Deadpool and Wolverine effect. The film's not necessarily the best of the franchise, but because of how many people and the names that are specifically in it, that is what's going to drive. It's going to be the Spider-Man No Way Home effect, right? Where it was the fact that it had the characters and all the actors back that really led to the success. That's what's going to happen. Now, the question is going to really be, is it going to be a good film or not? Because they have not had the best track record as of recently. Mr. Roy saying, hello, Mr. Roy. The Morak, what's going on, good sir? Saying, hi, Odin. Sorry I'm late. I have no excuse for my tardiness. It's okay. It's okay. Just catch up. Will Riker, what's going on? Will Riker, welcome back. Mikey Dreamer had to say, I saw 100 Nights of Hero in its second week, had a 97% drop. Granted, it's an indie film and wasn't in a lot of screens, but that's a ridiculous drop. Yeah. Hadn't even heard of it. So can't really say I'm surprised. Jay Nash, thank you. Brad JB saying they put a CGI dress on Florence Pugh for the Middle Eastern cut. Yeah, why couldn't we get that? Forever Sci-Fi, I think the only movie I'm looking forward to is Project Hail Mary. We need good sci-fi. Yeah, it has the most potential, I think. I would agree with you there. Dan Crane, what's going on, good sir? Who's a member, saying, hail to Odin and the family of Odin. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you. Tony Ilias, what's going on? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing that we oftentimes maybe forget, is that it is massive even outside of China. And that's why the question to me is going to be, how much does it make in the non-China international? Because it's likely going to be a lot, but will it be more than what is being made by Zootopia 2? And is the advantage of Zootopia 2 in China, at least as far as total box office goes, because obviously it's fool's gold when it comes to helping it break even or anything like that. But in total box office terms, that's obviously quite an advantage. Will it make more or not? Tony Elias, it really doesn't matter. It's still Disney. Whether it's 20th Century Studios or Searchlight, it's still the same. It's still Disney. Keely Chow, what's going on? Justin C. Hail and good evening, chat. Do you feel seeing Zootopia is necessary to see Zootopia 2? Need to use my free MC Investor Connect ice cream before the end of 2025. Nice. I haven't seen it yet. I've been hearing a lot of good things about it, though, so take that for what it is. Keely Chow, how are you? Not very well. My voice is slowly losing, so probably will only go for an hour tonight, so probably just a few more minutes. I'm all out of ice cream as well, so probably have some tea with some honey. But everyone else is doing fine. Everyone else is doing just fine. We're in exam week at school, so a little bit more free time, which is nice. But also a lot of mental energy on grading and dealing with last-minute people who should have cared for a lot longer than they have. Sahil, what's going on, good sir? Saying, just saw that my local Regal is going to have 13 screenings of Stranger Things finale on December 31st, starting at 8 p.m., and the first 5 shows are already sold out. That's insane. Look, I like Stranger Things as a property. I don't think this new season's got it. It's got a lot of weird stuff going on. And but it's still obviously very popular. Frank G, I'm predicting Avatar 3 to make significantly less than Avatar 2. I think it will make between 1.5 and 1.8 billion. We definitely agree less than 2 billion. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It's going to make a lot. Luke Zilla, if Avatar 3 ends up making 250 to 350 million in China, that would still be solid in another 1.2, 1.4 billion internationally. Less reliant on China compared to Zootopia 2, but let's see how it goes. As I said, right, if it makes less in China, that doesn't mean much for net profits. But it still would then have to be as effective or as successful outside of China, and more so to close the gap between those two films specifically. He then goes on to say he thinks it is 2 billion. Again, I think it's on the table. I'm not ruling out 2 billion. I'm not ruling out matching the last film or better. But based on the current tracking and based on the general sentiment around the film, I don't think it's going to be as successful. I feel like every film, I think this franchise has this is just a pure feeling on my part, just kind of a gut instinct thing. It just feels like a franchise that's going to continue to lose more and more and more people because there's nothing to keep you stuck in the universe. There's nothing to really bring you back for more unless you are someone that just really likes the pretty stuff on screen or have a personal connection to it. So I think that it's just going to continue to lose audience. And there's going to be a bit of a break between this one and the next ones, right? Because they're going to be filming, I think, 4 and 5 simultaneously, similar to what they did to 2 and 3, which is why they could release them relatively close to each other. So, yeah. Hardwick, 813, saying the Middle Eastern cut of Oppenheimer doesn't have black bars as far as I know. Uses CGI clothing, which costs millions of dollars to generate. I know of a place where it can be obtained. Ah, nice. Again, black bars was more of a general sentiment, not I like when people take me literally. It was blacked out is the main idea you're supposed to get from that. Banjo Sandwich. Just created a Criticalist Flop 10 list off to bed. God bless you, Banjo Sandwich. Appreciate it. Tony Ilias tagged to say, I predict Avengers Doomsday to do 1.5 billion at the box office, which would be a massive box office flop, considering it will probably need at least 2.5 billion to break even theatrically. Obviously, we don't know budgets yet for that film, but what we do know is that it's going to cost a ton. It's going to cost a ton. We got Ninja hanging out in chat. What's going on? Heartbreak Ridge has been a member for 24 months, 2 years, man. Heartbreak Ridge made it. Welcome. Let's see. Shorty Short saying, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Bedford Falls. Yeah, an early Merry Christmas to you, Laura. Thank you. Appreciate it. We start to wrap things up just for the sake of my voice. For sci-fi, Doomsday is going to be like the Yankees, a bloated payroll for little return. Hardwick, did you hear about Avengers Doomsday teaser leak? Someone just mentioned that in the chat. It then says, the first one shows Steve Rogers riding home on a motorcycle and holding his baby son. What? Now we're talking like Steve Rogers? That's quite a thing to put in the teaser trailer. Heartbreak Ridge. Also looking forward to Project Hail Mary. Nice. Jose Taco, what's going on? Welcome. Luke Zilla, tagged to say, considering Cameron is net worth of 1.1 billion, even Avatar 3 ends up at 1.9 billion of barely passing 2 billion. Probably has enough money to fund 4 and 5. Oh, I mean, I would definitely agree. They're going to be made. They're definitely going to be made. But, you know, my hope, because I just can't stand the franchise. My hope is that by the end of the series, right, Avatar 5, by the end of it, if they can just be losing money officially, if they can just be universally recognized as flops, if it gets to that point where they just keep losing audience with every film, and then by the 5th one, if not more, they all of a sudden are now losing a boatload of money, that would just make me happy. But again, that's where I am with that. Hosako, I believe Cameron said if 3 doesn't make 2 billion, 4 and 5 won't be made. Oh, man. If he said that, I hope he keeps to his word. And man, oh man, am I now ever more going to be rooting for the film to not make $2 billion. Really hope that's true. However, because of the fact I think I just mentioned 4 and 5 have either already started filming or are going to be starting to film, you know. All right, almost got up with the chat for the most part. So before we get to final comments, so please don't, especially if you've been in the chat already for a little bit, and you've already asked a lot of questions, please don't take this as an opportunity to ask a bunch more. All right, because I'm trying to end the stream soon. And there's a bit of a delay, obviously, between me saying this and the end of the stream. So if you're hearing this now, please, 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 trying to save my voice as best I can. But obviously, we mentioned this at the very beginning of the show. Rest in peace to Rob Reiner. We still obviously are learning a lot, but it's tragic whenever anyone passes, but especially in this case, someone to be murdered potentially by a family member. We obviously pray for the repose of his soul, for his wife, and we pray for his family as well. We don't have to like somebody as far as their opinions are concerned or anything like that, but we should recognize the humanity that we all have. And so I thought it'd be cool just to kind of go through some of the films. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of films that I still haven't seen in my life. But as far as the best films that he made, some of them I didn't even know he had made them until I pulled up this list. Some of my favorites are as follows. So obviously, this is Spinal Tap. Hilarious. I discovered that film much later in life, and it just is so funny. And Rob Reiner does such a great job of playing the documentarian in the film back in 1984. Stand By Me, a classic. Obviously just a director there, but clearly had a firm grasp on what he wanted to make. It showed that he could make a regular non-mockumentary style movie, right? Effectively. He then followed it up with a series of phenomenal movies, right? So Princess Bride, most people consider that to be one of the greatest films of all time. I would agree with them. It's a classic. When Harry Met Sally, also a classic comedy there. Misery, if you've never seen this before, you should. James Caan gives a great performance, but obviously this is a movie that is, completely dominated by Kathy Bates' performance. Kathy Bates is phenomenal in this movie. And, oh man, this film, very difficult to watch, psychological horror film, but so good too. And can't get over, again, that Kathy Bates performance. Makes you never look at certain things the same way ever again. I've actually never seen A Few Good Men. It's on my list of things to watch, obviously, and especially with now his death, I'm sure that my wife and I will probably be watching some of his films, kind of as a way of honoring his memory. Heard always great things about it, though. Obviously, some of the most iconic lines from this film. So he was a part of putting that all together. A bunch of films that I have not actually seen. Here's one that I really like, and I had no idea it was a Rob Reiner film until I pulled up this list. And it's The Bucket List with Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman. As someone who lost a good friend to cancer when we were young, it kind of it hit me in that way, right? With obviously these are now two older men who are dealing with cancer, but still they give a great performance. It's a great comedic performance from them too. It's funny. It deals with a very sensitive subject in a very, I think a very careful way. And the performances are really what drive this film home. This was one of my top movies for a long time. It's been a while since I've watched it. I'd have to see if it holds up still today. But for a long time, The Bucket List was one of my top films of all time, as far as more modern films are concerned. But really love that film. And then didn't really watch any of his other films until Spinal Tap 2, which I also really enjoyed. It obviously kind of recaptures the same type of humor as the first film, and I don't think it really exceeds the first film in that department, but it's actually so much better than it has any right to be, and I had fun with it. I laughed at it. I enjoyed. And one can also never forget that he was also an actor, that he was a part of this. Obviously, All in the Family, his role as the meathead, great performance in that. One of my favorite modern performances from him was as the father in The Wolf of Wall Street. I thought he did great in that. And then he did a really great job recurring his role as Marty DiMergi in Spinal Tap 2 as well. So a lot of great roles and a lot of great films as well. And I'm sure there's a bunch of films that I was not able to watch, and you're like, oh, you need to watch this. You need to watch prolific filmmaker. Doesn't matter whether you like him or not. Terrible what happened to him. And that's why we pray for him. And we pray for his family. And yeah. All right, Hardwick. Do you have any questions ready to ask Zachary Levi on the next FNT? Not right off the top of my head. But obviously I'll be kind of like looking through what are some things to maybe ask. It's always so hard to get a word in edgewise on the show anyway. So I think the chances of me being able to even ask a question without, someone else already, taking the floor doesn't seem very likely. Also, the way the show has been more recently, is that because the panel is so large now, just because we have one guest, if everyone else shows up, because I have a family and I'm not able to always be on the entire time, I'm the first one then that is asked to step aside to make room for panelists, basically. So I would say there's a high chance that I'm asked to not be on the stream. If it's expected that everyone's going to be there. Now, theoretically, I should have known that a few days ago, so I have not heard anything since then. But, we'll see. Hope to be on there because I would love to be able to ask him questions, especially about his faith. Because obviously he's now at the point of his career, he's starting to shift to a faith background for film, or at least inspired. So I think that would be something to look into. Geek364, what's going on, brother? Sorry I missed the stream. Merry Christmas all. Hey, Merry Christmas to you. Hardwick, yes. Chris Evans and Steve Rogers. Wow. Justin C. That's how they're going to try to pull people back in. Justin C, feel better, and we'll see you all next week. No Steven, so you're good. Yes. Because Steven would have been like, oh, you're wrapping up right now? Caveat ties, will there ever be another Princess Bride? I don't think so. Banjo Sandwich saying, Rob made some great films. Seriously, great films. Frank G, Kathy Bates' performance is definitely one of the best performances of all time from an agreed. Absolutely. And then Banjo Sandwich saying, we love you if you are on or off FNT. I appreciate it, Banjo Sandwich. I appreciate it. Forever Sci-Fi, good night and God bless. God bless you, Forever Sci-Fi. I appreciate it. And that's going to be a wrap for me, everybody. So I really, again, appreciate all of y'all's love and all of y'all's support. This has been a fun stream, even with my voice being as trash as it is. So I'll make sure to rest it, get a little tea and honey, and just some rest. And it's about to get crazy, guys. It is about to get crazy at the box office. Avatar 3 is going to make a boatload of money worldwide. And the battle between it and Zootopia 2 is going to be very interesting to see play out. So I want to thank everybody for watching. For all those that sent super chats, appreciate it. XBoot85, Brady6687, Very754. Y'all are awesome, so I very much appreciate y'all for that love and for that support. And for everyone else out there who's been in the chat, the lurkers, those smashing the like button, amongst others, y'all have been awesome. So again, thank you all very much for your love and for support. We are still in the midst of Advent season, so hope your Advent is going swimmingly. And we'll have a show next week before Christmas arrives and our celebration can truly begin with our 12 days of the Christmas season leading up to the Feast of the Epiphany on January 6th. People oftentimes forget these things and these connections. So it's a wonderful time of the year, not just because the song says so. But anyway, you guys are all amazing. People have a wonderful rest of your evening, a blessed Monday. And as always, God bless. now let me give a shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my Patreon members, Father Luca Illich. Hail to you, Father. And also to Miss Mountain Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Mountain Muses. She is very lovely, great, awesome Catholic faith-based content over there. You'll also find over on Subscribestar my member Matt317. He is on Twitch with the same channel name, Matt317. Shout out to you, good sir. And also to a longtime member here, Mr. Roy, my Chosen of Valhalla member here on YouTube. Mr. Roy, thank you for always hanging out and for always being a part of this channel. It does mean a lot, as well as it does for all of my Chosen of Valhalla members. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream or video, or if you want it listed in that list that was playing just before, just now, check out the top link in the video description below. You'll find out how to get those types of shout outs at the end of every live stream and video. Not to mention, you get access to bonus video content and also access to a Discord server where there are a couple of channels on there where I do giveaways every single month. In fact, I do multiple giveaways every single month. I try to make it so that I'm giving away Blu-rays and 4Ks that make up at least 4 or 5 different giveaways. Sometimes I have to put them in all towards the very end because back in the school session, of course, now means that I'm going to be a little bit more delayed there. So if you want access to things like that, if you want access to a great community, you guys seriously are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.